When distance starts to end, it rarely happens with a dramatic confession or an emotional message. It happens quietly, subtly, almost in a way that's easy to overlook if you're not paying attention. The first sign is a shift in how she communicates. Not more intensity, not heavy emotion, but intentional, low-pressure presence. Her messages don't feel rushed or defensive anymore. There's no need to explain herself or reopen old conversations. Instead, the tone softens. The interaction feels easier. She may reach out with something simple, even ordinary, but the effort is real. That effort matters more than the words themselves, because when someone has emotionally distanced themselves, they don't invest energy without a reason. This kind of communication signals safety, emotional safety. She's not trying to fix the past or secure the future. She's testing the present moment. She wants to know if connection with you can exist without tension, pressure, or emotional overload. That's why the messages feel light. Light doesn't mean shallow, it means unburdened. Most men misinterpret this phase. They either assume it means nothing and stay overly guarded, or they overinterpret it and flood the interaction with emotion. Both reactions push distance back into place. The key is to recognize what's actually happening. She's reopening the door just enough to see what's on the other side. Intentional communication doesn't look like constant texting. It looks like consistency. She doesn't disappear mid-conversation. She responds with presence. She asks small questions that keep the exchange alive. These are signs of emotional re-engagement, not boredom or politeness. Another important shift is the absence of pressure. She's not asking where things are going. She's not bringing up unresolved issues. She's not demanding clarity. That's because clarity isn't what she's seeking yet. She's seeking comfort. She wants to feel whether being in contact with you feels calm or heavy. If your energy during this phase is steady, she relaxes. If it's tense, she retreats. That's why your response matters more than her message. This is not the moment to prove growth or demonstrate change verbally. Growth is shown through restraint, through emotional control, through not needing the interaction to mean more than it does. Low-pressure communication also allows her to preserve dignity. Reconnecting emotionally is vulnerable. By keeping things light, she avoids the risk of rejection or disappointment. It's her way of approaching without fully exposing herself. Respecting that boundary builds trust. You may notice that her messages are timed intentionally, not impulsive, not late-night emotional dumps. They come when she's regulated. That's another signal that distance is ending. She's choosing connection from stability, not impulse. This is also where many men sabotage progress by trying to accelerate the process. They push for deeper conversations or try to clear the air, but depth comes later. Right now, the goal is ease. Emotional ease creates momentum. Pressure kills it. If you stay present without chasing, engage without overinvesting, she begins to associate you with calm rather than uncertainty. That association is what allows distance to continue closing naturally. And when communication feels easy again, that's your cue to slow down, not speed up. Expend key point 2 in 6 and 50 words according to prompt without any heading, and flow speech naturally according to overall key points, and add only necessary ending line. When distance starts to fade, she doesn't come back asking for commitment or clarity. She comes back testing access, emotional access. That distinction matters more than most people realize. She's not trying to restart the relationship. She's trying to understand how it feels to be emotionally close to you again. This phase is subtle. It doesn't look like big questions or serious conversations. It shows up in small probes, casual check-ins, light personal questions, moments where she opens a door just enough to see how you respond. She's observing whether emotional engagement with you feels safe, calm, or overwhelming. Most men misread these tests. They hear a personal question and assume it's an invitation to go deep. They start explaining their feelings, their growth, their intentions. But that level of disclosure isn't what she's asking for yet. She's asking one simple question beneath everything else. Does this feel easy? These emotional tests are about regulation. She wants to know whether interacting with you pulls her into chaos or steadiness. If your responses feel grounded and unreactive, she relaxes. If they feel emotionally charged, rushed, or outcome-focused, she pulls back, not because she doesn't care, but because it feels unsafe. She might ask how you've been. She might reference something personal from the past. She might comment on a change she notices in you. These aren't invitations to relive history. They're gauges. She's measuring your emotional temperature. This is where discipline matters. You don't withhold or shut down, but you also don't overexpose. You answer honestly, simply, without loading your response with expectation. You stay present without trying to steer the interaction toward resolution. Emotional access is earned through consistency, not intensity. When you show that you can engage without needing something in return, trust rebuilds. She starts to feel that connection doesn't come with emotional cost anymore. Another key signal is pacing. She sets the tempo, not because she has control, but because she's still recalibrating her comfort level. If you try to lead too fast here, you disrupt that process. Leadership at this stage is restraint, not direction. These tests also allow her to maintain autonomy. She's not surrendering independence or reopening wounds. She's exploring from a position of safety. When you respect that, you differentiate yourself from the version of you associated with pressure or uncertainty. The more neutral and composed your responses are, the more she leans in. Not emotionally at first, but energetically. Conversations last longer. She asks follow-up questions. She shares more freely. These are signs access is increasing. If you push for definitions or outcomes too early, you collapse the emotional space she's testing. That space is what allows attraction to rebuild organically. This phase isn't about winning her back. It's about showing that connection with you no longer feels heavy. And when emotional access feels safe, closeness follows naturally. Expend key point 3 in 650 words, according to prompt, without any heading, and flow speech naturally according to overall key points, and add only necessary ending line. When distance begins to close, alignment replaces effort. You don't have to chase, you don't have to push. Instead, something quieter happens. She starts matching your pace, your tone, your emotional temperature. This mirroring isn't intentional, it's instinctive. And it's one of the clearest signs that emotional resistance is dissolving. People mirror what feels safe. When someone is guarded, they move inconsistently, hot and cold, engage one moment, distant the next. But as comfort returns, behavior stabilizes. She begins responding in a rhythm that reflects yours. If you're calm, she stays calm. If you're measured, she slows down. This is alignment, not coincidence. Many men misunderstand this moment and think it's time to accelerate. They respond faster, text more, suggest deeper conversations. But mirroring only continues if the original energy remains stable. If you change the tempo abruptly, she senses pressure and retreats. Not because she's uninterested, but because the emotional environment shifted too quickly. Matching energy doesn't mean copying behavior. It means staying consistent with yourself. If you lead with steadiness, she naturally synchronizes. That synchronization is a sign of trust forming again. She's no longer protecting herself from emotional unpredictability. Another indicator is effort balance. Conversations don't feel one-sided anymore. She asks questions, she follows up, she contributes without being prompted. This doesn't happen when someone is emotionally distant. It happens when investment is returning. Mirroring also shows up in vulnerability, but in small doses. She may share something personal, then pause. If your response is composed and non-intrusive, she opens a bit more next time. This gradual openness only happens when emotional pacing feels respected. Your role here is simple but difficult. Don't disrupt the rhythm. Let the interaction breathe. Respond fully, not excessively. Stay engaged without trying to anchor the moment to a future outcome. When she mirrors your energy, she's unconsciously saying, I'm comfortable here. Comfort precedes attraction. Attraction precedes commitment. Skipping steps breaks momentum. This is also where authenticity matters. If your calm is forced or performative, mirroring won't last. But if your steadiness comes from genuine emotional regulation, alignment deepens naturally. Mirroring fades quickly if inconsistency returns. If you oscillate between distance and intensity, she pulls back to protect equilibrium. Stability invites closeness. This phase rewards patience. The more you maintain your frame, the more the dynamic normalizes. Interaction starts to feel natural again, not strategic, not strained. When energy is matched, distance is already dissolving. All you have to do is not interfere. Expend key point 4 in 650 words according to prompt, without any heading, and flow speech naturally according to overall key points, and add only necessary ending line. When distance begins to soften, the past doesn't return as a problem, it returns as context. Not to be analyzed, not to be fixed, but to be remembered. One of the clearest signs that emotional distance is ending is when she starts bringing up shared experiences again. Old jokes, familiar references, moments that only the two of you understand. This isn't nostalgia for its own sake, it's emotional reconnection without confrontation. When someone is emotionally closed, they avoid shared history. It carries weight. It risks reopening feelings they're not ready to manage. But when that distance starts to ease, the mind naturally revisits familiar emotional territory. She's not trying to relive the relationship. She's checking whether the emotional memory still feels safe. These moments often appear casually, a reference to something that happened months ago, a joke you both used to laugh at, a song, a place, a memory dropped into conversation without explanation. She's testing whether shared context still creates warmth or discomfort. This is where many men go wrong. They interpret these references as invitations to dive into the past, to analyze what went wrong, to explain how they've changed. But doing that shifts the interaction from light to heavy, and heaviness pushes distance back into place. The correct response is presence, not interpretation. You acknowledge the moment without attaching meaning to it. You engage without trying to turn it into something more. That restraint keeps the emotional pathway open. Shared context is powerful because it bypasses logic. It reconnects through feeling. When she laughs at an old reference or remembers something fondly, she's reconnecting with how the connection felt, not what it was defined as. This also allows her to approach emotionally without risking rejection. If the moment lands well, she feels closer. If it doesn't, she can retreat without vulnerability. Respecting that safety is essential. You'll notice these references increase when your responses remain relaxed. If you react with intensity or expectation, they stop. If you stay grounded, they become more frequent. That's how emotional comfort rebuilds, through repeated, low-risk connection. Shared context also rehumanizes the connection. Distance often creates abstraction. People become ideas instead of experiences. Bringing back shared memories makes you real again, not as a problem to solve, but as a presence associated with familiarity. This is not the time to reminisce deeply or romanticize the past. It's about acknowledging emotional continuity without living in it. The past becomes a bridge, not a destination. If distance were still solid, these moments wouldn't surface. Their return means emotional walls are lowering. And the best way to let that process continue is to meet memory with calm, not momentum. Expend key point 5 and 6 of 50 words according to prompt without any heading, and flow speech naturally according to overall key points, and add only necessary ending line. When emotional distance is present, behavior becomes unpredictable, messages are inconsistent, plans are vague, follow through is uncertain. That instability isn't random, it's a sign of internal conflict. But when distance begins to end, one of the clearest changes you'll notice is predictability. Not intensity, not big gestures, just steadiness. She starts doing what she says she will do. If she says she'll call, she calls. If she says she'll text later, she follows through. Conversations don't abruptly drop off anymore. This doesn't happen when someone is emotionally checked out. It happens when emotional investment is quietly returning. Predictability signals safety. It means she no longer feels the need to guard herself through distance or inconsistency. She's comfortable enough to be reliable. That reliability is emotional presence expressed through action. Many men underestimate how important this phase is. They're waiting for verbal reassurance or emotional declarations. But behavior always speaks first. When actions stabilize, emotions are already shifting internally. This is also where patience is tested. Predictability doesn't mean momentum yet, it means foundation. If you try to accelerate things here, you disrupt the balance that's forming. Stability has to be protected before closeness can deepen. Another sign is responsiveness without anxiety. She doesn't take days to reply anymore. She doesn't disappear after meaningful exchanges. There's a natural flow to communication. That flow is a sign that emotional resistance is lowering. This phase often feels deceptively simple. Nothing dramatic is happening, and that's exactly why it's powerful. Emotional security isn't loud, it's quiet consistency. Your role here is to mirror reliability, not demand more. You don't question the change. You don't ask what it means. You let actions continue to speak. Predictability also shows up in emotional tone. She's not hot and cold. Her energy feels even, and that evenness creates trust. Trust is the gateway to deeper connection. If distance were still active, inconsistency would remain. The fact that it's fading is your confirmation. The strongest response you can give to predictability is calm appreciation, not excitement. Let stability settle. Because once consistency is established, connection has room to grow. Expend key point 6 and 6 and 50 words according to prompt without any heading, and flow speech naturally according to overall key points, and add only necessary ending line. When emotional distance is truly ending, it doesn't show up as a dramatic confession or a sudden declaration of feelings. It shows up as openings, small, intentional invitations that allow real interaction to happen without pressure. This is the final and most revealing sign because it moves the connection out of theory and back into reality. These openings are subtle, a suggestion to meet somewhere neutral, a casual mention of an event, a reason to be in the same space again that doesn't feel heavy or emotionally loaded. She's not asking to define anything, she's asking to experience you again. This matters because attraction doesn't live in conversation alone, it lives in presence, tone, energy, how someone feels around you. By creating opportunities for interaction, she's signaling that emotional comfort has reached a point where distance no longer feels necessary. Many men sabotage this stage by making the moment too big. They treat the invitation as proof that everything is back on track. They rush, they overplan, they attach expectations. And that pressure can collapse the opening before it has a chance to develop. The correct response is simplicity. You acknowledge the invitation calmly. You agree without hesitation or excitement. You don't interrogate her intentions. You don't seek reassurance. You let the interaction exist without demanding meaning from it. These early meetups aren't about rekindling the relationship. They're about recalibrating emotional chemistry, seeing whether connection feels natural again, whether tension is gone, whether being together feels light instead of heavy. This is also where leadership shows itself clearly. You keep things grounded. You choose environments that are relaxed. You don't bring up the past. You don't push the future. You stay present. If the interaction flows, you allow it to end naturally. You don't extend it artificially. You leave space for reflection. That space allows her to process the experience positively, without emotional overload. If the opening is indirect, a shared errand, a casual invitation, you treat it the same way, neutral. Easy, no emotional interpretation. Creating openings is her way of testing real-world alignment. Words can be controlled. Presence cannot. That's why this step comes last. If she wasn't interested, she wouldn't risk proximity. Distance would remain digital. The move toward interaction confirms that emotional walls are coming down. Your job is not to convince her of anything. It's to show through behavior that connection with you feels stable, calm, and safe. And if it does, closeness follows naturally. All you need to do is meet the moment without trying to own it.